Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. After the successful 6.1 million views of my heatless curls, I decided I would share with you my perfected reverse heatless curls to make sleeping in them that much more comfortable. I'm going to share with you the results. This is sleeping in them when your hair is ever so slightly damp. You get much more curl, you get a lot of volume and lift at the root, but if you prefer to do it on dry hair and leave it in for 2 hours, this is the softer result that you would get. I filmed this on 2 separate days, but I wore the same top just for continuity. So it's still beautiful, it just wouldn't last quite as long. Let's start with the technique, which I'm going to show you from my first tutorial. I know I've already started, but I'm going to show you the full technique on this side, but I want you to understand the process. The robe is going to stay in place the entire time. All we're doing is a really simple technique. We're taking the first strand across the front of the robe, taking it around the back of the robe, and back out the other side. And then with this section, we're going to do exactly the same. It's going to come across the front of the robe, around the back of the robe, and back out the other side. I usually create my heatless curls on a side parting because that's where I wear my hair. For this one, I'm going to do it on the center and I'm going to create a zigzag parting. This is so that when you take the wrap out, you don't have a definitive parting. I know lots of you said that the parting at the back for you stayed visible, whereas this will help disguise that. So use a towel comb or a hair grip just to create a nice zigzag, make it quite big, and then that way it won't be visible when you remove it. To make sure you're not pulling hair from the opposite section of your head, make sure you tie off the section that you're not working with. I like to wrap it in a bun, and then that way I'm not going to be pulling at it when I'm trying to reach for a new section of hair. Lots of you asked me about the robe tie. This is from a bathrobe. In the UK we call them dressing gowns, but you've seen these, they tie around your waist. I've stuck with this one because the material is super duper soft, so you get a really nice finish to your curls. A little tip, if your robe is quite thin and you find your curls are too tight, double it up on each side. It will be slightly thicker and that way you'll get less tight curls. Just to show you from behind, this is the shape that we're going to be creating. It's a V shape. Now remember, this is reverse curls, which means we're going to be starting at the back of our hair. So taking the center of the robe to one side, I'm going to pin it in place on the side that we're not grabbing hair from. This will prevent the robe from slipping and sliding and being longer on one side, which we don't want. Now this is really difficult for me to be able to show you, so I'm trying my best to bend forward as much as possible so you guys can see what I'm doing. As I said, we are starting at the back, so start with a little section of hair that you can separate into 2. Then place the robe tie in the middle of them, and then that's where we're going to start our wrapping technique. So as you can see, we have 2 sections and a robe tie in between them. So we're going to take one section, lay it over the top of the robe tie and directly around the back, and it comes back out where it started. And then we're going to do the same with the opposite side. It lays across the front of the robe, goes around the back of the robe and back out where it started. Much like you do when you French braid, you pick up a new section of hair and you add it to your existing section of hair. But instead of weaving this, we're just going to wrap it around the front of the robe, around the back and back where it started. So the hair itself never ends up on the opposite side of the head like it would do if you were braiding. Instead, you're just looping it around the robe tie, a bit like a horseshoe. Think of it as a U shape. So it goes across the front and around the back, and it always comes back to the same position. Now what makes this different to the original method, the wrapping technique is the same, but it's just the placement. The reason I'm doing it in reverse is because this makes it so much more comfortable to sleep on. When it goes down either side of your head past your ears, that's when it becomes uncomfortable if you're a side sleeper because there's a bulk across your head that means you can't lay flat on your pillow. So when you are wrapping this, keep thinking about pulling it towards the crown of your head or towards the center of your parting rather than down the side of your head and towards your ears. You want this to be as high up on your head as possible so that when you sleep on your side or your back, these aren't going to be in your way. I've had so many thousands of comments that have said this has been a game changer for you compared to the original method, which is just to wrap the hair all in one direction. That means that the curls all lay in the same direction and you don't get as much volume. The root tends to lay a little bit flat, but with my method, in terms of using 2 sections and wrapping them, that means you got lots of volume. The curls went in opposite directions, so then the curls don't lay flat against one another, they bounce off of one another, which means you get more height, more width, and you also get volume at the root. after the success of that tutorial, I wanted to work on it so that I could find a more comfortable method for sleeping on it, because I found on special occasions when I wanted my hair to be beautiful in the morning, but I wanted a more comfortable night's sleep, I thought, you know what, a reverse technique might be just what I need. And voila, here we are, and it's been brilliant. So as you can see, I've steered away from the ears, keeping the wrapping technique higher up closer to the center parting, and making my way to the front where I have a fringe, so I'm definitely going to include that. If your bangs are relatively shorter, sort of around the height of your eyebrows, just leave that out and you can tweak it either with a tong in the morning or you can leave them relatively straight. I've decided to leave this as is rather than rushing through, so you can really see the full technique, you can follow along rather than sort of cutting half of it out. I wanted to give you the full how-to on how I included every piece of hair. Remember to keep it as close to the root as possible as well, don't start to get baggy at this stage. Here I'm looping my fringe over at the front, so you can see keeping it nice and tight still, and now we're just going to continue to wrap the length of the hair around the robe tie until we've got no more hair left. So we're still doing the same technique, but we're no longer picking up and adding hair to it. Instead, we're working the way down the length of the hair that we've got left. So I'm zooming out here so you can kind of see the overall finish, and I will turn to the side in a moment. Keep wrapping until your ends are nice and smooth as possibly can be. When you've got layers like I have, you will get some hair sticking out, but don't worry, it will just add to the texture and the finish of your curls. So this is what it should look like from the back, nice and neat, all the way up to the front. Don't forget to tie that off with a clear elastic band. I like these ones as they don't snag the hair, so you haven't got to worry about split ends. I give it around 3 turns and that's enough to tie it off. Now don't worry about it being in your face at the moment, we will deal with that once we've done the opposite side. So again, just move the robe tie out the way while you section off a small V shape at the back of your head, which you're going to separate into 2 individual sections. Then you want to lift that robe tie up and place it in between the 2 strands of hair. Starting with one side, wrap that over the front of your robe tie and do a 360 by following it all the way around the robe tie, coming back out where it started. Then repeat the same process with the opposite strand across the front of the robe tie, back out where it started. This time we're going to add some hair to the first strand. I always like to put them in the opposite fingers because it makes for wrapping and adding hair to the strands much easier for me. This is a little bit fiddlier than the original method purely because you're working from the back of your head. However, once you've got the technique down, you can definitely feel your way through and it becomes a lot easier. So if you're new to this, go and follow the original method first so that you can really get the technique down, and then you'll be able to come back and you'll be able to perfect this no problem. So remember, my top tips are to try and keep this as close to your center parting and away from your ears as possible. So remember when you're working through this to direct the robe and your wrapping more in a straight line close to that center parting if you want it to be more comfortable when you sleep. Another little tip is to give the robe a little tug as you go along so that it doesn't bunch up, because it is easy for it to start to warp and move as you wrap it if you wrap it too tightly. Quite satisfying at this stage to see that really nice zigzag parting and the lovely wrapping technique that you start to achieve as you go along. One of the main questions I got in the original tutorial was your hair damp? My hair is always 10% damp, so it looks dry but it's cool to the touch. My hair is medium thickness, so if it was any more damp than this, it means it would still be damp in the center by the time the morning comes, and I need it to be 100% bone dry before we remove this. So everybody's hair will be different because it really depends on how thin or thick your hair is. Wetter hair equals tighter, more intense curls when it is completely dry, but remember you do run the risk of it being still a little bit damp by the time you remove it. This is my preference and my tip if you don't like the ends of your hair to be too tightly curled. Ideal if your hair is quite fine. Double up the end of your robe tie, and then when you've got no more hair to add in and you're just wrapping the ends, you can just continue to wrap this around the double thickness of the robe, and then that way your hair won't be so tight towards the end. I will show you both techniques. This is how I prefer to do it usually. This is my preference when my hair is slightly damp because it means that the curls won't be too tight towards the ends of my hair. Whereas if I'm wrapping dry hair, I don't mind leaving the robe tie thin and longer because the hair won't curl quite as well because it's dry. So you can afford for it to be tighter on the robe. I hope that makes sense. To keep it out your face, you can tie it around the back of your head in a small knot, or you can loop it on top, which is my preference. I tie it once and then I use a bobby pin just to pin it to my centre parting, and then I can sleep on it and it's not going to be in my way at all. So whether I'm sleeping on my side or on the back of my head, these are not going to bother me at all. So I'm going to go to sleep and I'll be back in the morning. So to get showered, I like to wrap my hair in a towel so that the humidity doesn't dampen it again. Now these ones I've slept in with the slightly wider curls, which means I doubled up the robe tie at the front. The reason I did this was because my hair was 10% damp. So this is the damp one that I'm going to show you first, and then I'll show you the technique on dry hair after. So you can see it's fared pretty well. I mean, you're still going to get a few kind of flyaways from sleeping on it, but overall it is pretty good. It still looked fine, but as you can see, as I remove the curls, they're beautifully smooth. I do put this down to the robe tie that I'm using. It is the material that keeps it really smooth. I filmed this the week before I filmed the dry one, and you'll see that this is when my hair needs toning. It's been ages since I toned my hair, so it's very warm, whereas the one to follow this is after I've toned my hair, so it looks a bit cooler. So if you can see the difference, that'll be why. So you want to be gentle when you're removing these so that you don't break up your curls too much, because we are going to just shake this out rather than pulling the curls apart, which some people like to do. That's when you run into frizz. Now when I remove this, you'll notice that my fringe looks quite fuzzy to begin with, but again, as soon as you start to manipulate it with your fingers, you'll find that it falls into a really beautiful curl pattern. So just so you can see, this is the back. As you can see, we've got lots of volume at the root. The curl goes right up to the top. When it comes to your fringe, you can either place a little bit of argan oil on your hands or a smoothing balm. I didn't apply anything because I just want to show you what you can do with it just being dry. So separate your fringe. Then you want to brush it through with your fingers so it all starts to go into the same kind of curl, and then you'll start to see that the frizz does start to die away and that you end up with much more of a defined curl. I always like to blow dry my fringe before I wrap my hair, but I know some of you prefer a completely heatless curls technique, so I purposely didn't do it this time so you guys can see how you can manipulate your fringe even though you've not blow dried it. I absolutely love this technique. It's such a game changer if you want healthy hair. Again, I'm going to show you the back so you can see that there's lots of volume, lots of curl, and this is just shaking out. So as the day goes on, it will get a tiny bit softer, but for me, it really does last until I wash it out. A week later I filmed this version, so it's freshly washed but the hair is completely air dried, and then I wrapped it and took it out 2 hours later, and this was the result. Bear in mind this is a lot softer, but it wouldn't last until you washed it. By the end of the day it will drop significantly. However, if you're just going out for the afternoon, then this is perfect. I hope you guys love this reverse heatless curls technique. Let me know if you try it. I'd love to know if you have a much more comfortable night's sleep. Please give the tutorial a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to my channel if you are new. My name is Shonagh Scott and I upload 2 videos a week and a short on a Monday. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Bye guys!